Climate change and its larger impacts have been talked about all over the globe. But have you really noticed those small little changes in our lives? कि यार आजकल गर्मी बहुत होती है, पहले जैसी बारिश नहीं होती. My grandma usually complains कि सब्जियों में पहले जैसा स्वाद नहीं है. Also, those cute little pigeons that we used to spot are nowhere to be found. These are actually the small little changes that are part of the larger impact of the looming consequences of climate change. And this is where we can say that climate change is not just near, but it is actually here. But do not worry and do not get disheartened, because a lot of international organizations and countries are working together to fight the climate change. And one of the major events is actually the COP27. So hey everyone, welcome to Learn with Phenology. I am Himanshi and today we'll be talking about not just the COP27 but the related history as well. Now to understand COP27, we need to go back in time and talk about the time when 178 nations gathered and was recorded as the largest gathering of world leaders. Reason: to strike a balance between the environment and the economic development. This was the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, or so called as the Earth Summit. It was held in the year 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. Here, 3 conventions were established, one for desertification, one for climate change, and one for biodiversity. But the climate change wala thing is important for us because that's what we're discussing, which has a near universal membership. Now, each of these conventions have their yearly conference of parties or the COPs unless the parties decide otherwise. COP is actually the supreme decision-making body which talks about the implementation of their respective convention and also talked about the progress and the assessment of the parties as well. The climate change related convention is the UNFCCC, for which 26 COPs have been held, and the recent COP27 is yet to be concluded. The first of which was held in Berlin in 1995, and since then many of these have been held. Say the COP third, which led to the establishment of Kyoto Protocol. This was established in the year 1997 but was implemented from 2005 till 2015 only, because after this Paris Agreement came into picture. But what is the Kyoto Protocol? This is an international treaty which talks about limiting the greenhouse gas emissions like methane, carbon dioxide, hydrofluorocarbons, which lead to the rise in temperature of Earth. Besides this, the Kyoto Protocol also talks about कॉमन बट डिफरेंशिएटेड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, यानी पोल्यूटर्स पे प्रिंसिपल. जो कंट्री ज्यादा डैमेज करेगी, ज्यादा पोल्यूट करेगी, वो ज्यादा कंपेंसेट भी करेगी. And to implement this protocol, India also instituted the National Action Plan on Climate Change in the year 2008. Now, this protocol was superseded by the Paris Agreement, which was established in COP21 in 2015. Now, why is this important to us? It is important because the recent COP27 talks about the implementation of this Paris Agreement itself. Now, this Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change, whose goal is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius or preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial levels. So whenever we are talking about limiting the Earth ka temperature, it is this agreement that we are talking about. Now, it was a landmark case for us because this is where all the nations came together for the first time for a common cause and was also legally binding. Now, to implement this agreement, the nations come up with nationally determined contributions, which are actually their climate change related action plans, what they will do for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. And it is in respect to this that in the last year's COP26 of Glasgow, India submitted or India talked about its 5-point pledge or Panchamrit, where we discussed about achieving net zero by 2070, reducing the emissions by 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide and many other pointers as well. Now, these NDCs are on a cycle and needs to be updated every 5 years, for which India has been doing its bit as well. Finally, we now discuss about the COP27, which has been held in Egypt in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai Peninsula's southernmost point. It is being called as the COP of implementation because now we finally need to talk about the implementation of the Paris Agreement. Here, 3 key areas or 3 key themes have been discussed. Let's know about them as well. Now, first is the climate finance. As per the CBDR, developed nations have been asked for $100 billion every year to compensate for the problems that they have created. Next is about the loss and damage. Now, those people whose islands have submerged because of rising sea levels or others who are facing such climate-related problems needs to be financed and needs to be compensated well under the loss and damage. And lastly, about just transition. Now, since we are transitioning to a greener economy, to a sustainable world, we need that to be fair and inclusive for all the communities, for all the countries, and for every individual. So these are the three key areas being discussed under COP27 recently. Now this was the whole story regarding COP27, its related agreements and terms as well. Now, before I answer the question whether the earth will survive or not, let me ask you a few questions. Do you use polythene or jute bags? Do you use bicycle or scooties? Do you segregate your waste into wet and dry? No, right? Not all of us. And that's what it comes down to. When all the individual communities, organizations, and all of us individually come together, only then will the earth survive. Now, before we conclude this session, this is a reminder to tell you that we have a current affairs course where we have in detail explained about the international organizations as well, which can be of immense help for your competitive exams. So this is where we conclude today's session. Now I shall see you in the next one.